I found a secret trapdoor in my new house. I think the previous owners were cultists. Moving into a new house is supposed to be exciting. For me, it was supposed to be the fresh start I desperately needed. After a brutal divorce and leaving behind a city filled with memories, I found myself in a charming little town in the middle of nowhere. The house was old, creaky, and full of character, but it was mine. The realtor had been a little too enthusiastic about the sale, brushing past questions about why it had been on the market so long. She'd muttered something about the previous owners moving overseas and left it at that. I didn't care. The price was right, and I was desperate for a change. The first few days were uneventful. I unpacked, rearranged furniture, and familiarized myself with the quirks of the old house: squeaky floorboards, doors that didn't quite close properly, and a basement that smelled faintly of damp. It was on the fourth day that I found the trapdoor. I was cleaning out the basement, a dimly lit space with cobwebs clinging to every corner. The basement was more of a cellar, with stone walls and a dirt floor. I'd been sweeping up when my broom hit something hard, sending a hollow thud echoing through the room. I knelt down and brushed away the dirt. Beneath it was a wooden panel, weathered and splintering, with a rusted metal ring in the center. A trapdoor. I hesitated. Every rational part of me screamed to leave it alone, to seal it back up and forget I'd ever found it. But curiosity is a powerful thing. I grabbed the ring and pulled. The wood groaned in protest, but it lifted, revealing a set of stone steps leading into darkness. A foul smell wafted up, a mix of damp earth and something metallic, like rusted iron. My stomach churned. I grabbed a flashlight and descended. The steps led to a narrow tunnel carved from the earth itself. The walls were lined with wooden beams, holding back the dirt. The air was cold, damp, and heavy, pressing against me with an almost tangible weight. The tunnel sloped downward, deeper into the ground. I considered turning back, but something compelled me to keep going. After what felt like forever, the tunnel opened into a chamber. The room was large, its walls covered in strange symbols carved into the stone. They were intricate and alien, spiraling and twisting in patterns that made my head hurt if I looked too long. In the center of the room was an altar. It was made of black stone, smooth and polished, and stained with dark, dried streaks that could only be one thing. On the altar rested a dagger, its blade jagged and cruel, with a handle wrapped in leather that looked suspiciously like skin. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. As I stood there, frozen, I noticed something else. The walls weren't just carved with symbols. They were covered in paintings, crude but unsettlingly lifelike. They depicted scenes of hooded figures gathered around the altar, holding up the dagger. In one, a figure was kneeling before the altar, their hands bound, their face twisted in terror. In another, the hooded figures were raising their arms, as though in celebration. Above them, something loomed. It was massive, its form indistinct but terrifying. A writhing mass of tendrils, eyes and mouths that seemed to stare out of the wall, directly at me. I backed away, my breath coming in shallow gasps. That's when I heard it. A faint whispering, so quiet I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. But as I strained to listen, it grew louder. The words were in a language I couldn't understand, but their intent was clear. They were calling me. I fled. I didn't stop running until I was back in the basement, slamming the trapdoor shut and piling heavy boxes on top of it. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking. For the rest of the night, I sat in the living room with every light in the house on, clutching a kitchen knife. The next day, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just an old storm shelter or a wine cellar that had been left to decay. Maybe the altar was just an old table, the dagger a forgotten tool. But the symbols haunted me. I spent hours online, searching for anything that resembled them. What I found made my blood run cold. They were sigils, associated with summoning rituals. Some were linked to ancient cults rumored to worship things, not gods exactly, but entities that predated human existence. Entities that weren't meant to be understood. I wanted to leave, but something stopped me. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was something else entirely. That night, The whispers returned. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of murmuring voices. They were coming from the basement. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the sound grew louder, more insistent. Gripping the knife, I crept down the stairs. The trapdoor was open. The voices stopped the moment I stepped into the basement. The air was colder than it should have been, and the smell was stronger. The boxes I'd piled onto the trapdoor were scattered across the floor. Against my better judgment, I descended the steps again. The chamber was exactly as I'd left it, but something was different. The altar was glowing faintly, the symbols on its surface pulsing with a sickly green light. And then I saw them. The hooded figures. They were standing around the altar, their forms translucent, like shadows given shape. Their faces were hidden, but I could feel their eyes on me. One of them raised a hand and pointed. I don't remember running back to the house. When I woke up the next morning, I was in my bed, the door to the basement locked. But the whispers haven't stopped. I've started finding things in the house. Scraps of paper with symbols drawn on them. Candles melted down to stubs. And the dagger. It was on my kitchen counter this morning, clean and gleaming as though it had never aged. I don't know how it got there. I think the house wants me to finish what the cult started, and I'm terrified I won't be able to resist.